Abre sesión pública da Real Academia Galega de Ciencias para dar ingreso como académico correspondente electo a Sir David Chipperfield. Ten a palabra a señora vicepresidenta da Academia, profesora dona Alicia Estévez Toranzo, que dará lectura ao certificado de nomeamento como académico correspondente do candidato electo.
Boas tardes. Dona Minia Manteiga Outeiro, secretaria da Real Academia Galega de Ciencias, certifica que na sesión ordinaria do Pleno desta Real Academia, celebrada en formato telemático e presencial o 13 de decembro de 2023, o punto 5 da orden do día corresponde a propostas de académicos correspondentes. Presentáronse as propostas das persoas candidatas elaboradas por as diferentes seccións da Academia e, despois de un breve debate, o Pleno acordou o nomeamento como académico correspondente do Dr. David Chipperfield por la sección de Ciencias Técnicas en Santiago de Compostela a 7 de setembro de 2025. Moitas grazas.
Moitas grazas. Pregolles o académico máis antigo e o señor académico máis recente aquí presentes, profesor don Manuel Freire Rama e profesor Dr. don Carlos Diegues González, que proceden a invitar o candidato a acceder á sala de sesións e o acompañen ao estrado. Ten a palabra o académico numerario e presidente da sección de Ciencias Técnicas, profesor doctor don Pedro Marino Gómez, que presentará a laudatio do académico electo.
Señor presidente da Real Academia Galega de Ciencias, señor conselleiro de Emprego, Comercio e Migración, señores vicerrectores das Universidades de Santiago de Compostela e da Universidade da Coruña, señora directora da Axencia Galega de Innovación, dignísimas autoridades, prezados colegas da Academia, familiares e amigos de David Chipperfield, miñas donas e meus señores. Este acto académico ten unha fasquía singular, xa que celebramos unha das ceremonias máis entrañables da institución, o ingreso dun novo membro. Permítame que as miñas primeiras verbas sexan para agradecer aos meus colegas o terme encargado a honrosa tarefa de facer a laudatio de ingreso na Academia do arquitecto Sir David Chipperfield. Cando na sección de Ciencias Técnicas propuxemos nomealo académico da RAC, foron moitas as razóns que sustentaron a proposta, xa que éramos dabondo conscientes dos seus méritos e da obriga que tiñamos de recoñeceros, e tamén do que supoñía dar acubillo a quen, a súa vez, achegaba prestixio e honra á Academia o aceptar generosamente este nomeamento. E a proposta foi asumida e feita súa por o pleno da Academia, como sempre o é se as razóns e as querencias coinciden. Permítame agora salientar algúns dos méritos do electo, algo que forma parte do rito e da necesidade, por máis que todos os asistentes sexan conocedores da importancia da súa obra e da influencia que está a ter na formación da moderna tradición arquitectónica internacional. Con motivo da entrega do Premio Pricker de Arquitectura en Atenas no ano 2023, o presidente do xurado, o arquitecto chileno Alejandro Aravena, salientou que, e cito textualmente, o premio se outorga en recoñecemento a aquelas calidades de talento, visión e compromiso que teñen producido de xeito persistente contribucións significativas á humanidade e ao entorno construído a través da arquitectura. A carreira de David Chipperfield está marcada por un rigor e coherencia a longo plazo nun campo de traballo que ten integrado e equilibrado perfectamente ambos termos da ecuación. Convén, pois, lembrar aquí aqueles feitos máis significativos da súa dilatada e fecunda traxectoria profesional que se inicia no período de 1978 a 1984, despois de ter rematado os seus estudios de arquitectura na Universidade de Kingston e na Asociación de Arquitectura da Escola de Arquitectura de Londres, cando traballou con arquitectos tan recoñecidos como Richard Rogers e Norman Foster, onde aprendeu a facer que as cousas foran máis importantes do que deberían ser, segundo el mismo di, ata establecerse no seu propio estudio de arquitectura en Londres en 1985. O primeiro que chama a atención e, polo tanto, convén salientar é a súa inmensa e plural obra arquitectónica, que incluye máis de 100 proxectos, abarca máis de 4 décadas e comprende as máis diferentes tipoloxías como vivendas, estudios, edificios administrativos e empresariais, comerciais, culturais e institucionais, a creación de espacios públicos e a restauración ou remodelación de edificios e obras mestras arquitectónicas, ao tempo que preserva unha calidade de diseño meticulosa e consistente baseada na austeridade e na ausencia de artificios e de xestos retóricos que constituín as súas máis distintivas señais de identidade. A súa arquitectura busca ser práctica, duradeira e ben construída, con especial atención aos materiais nobres e de calidade. Ao mesmo tempo, a súa conciencia acerca do cambio climático o leva a defender o diseño de lugares que promovan o transporte público e integren os espacios verdes. A idea xa non é tanto construir con fins económicos e turísticos, canto para os propios cidadáns. O crecemento e o consumo teñen que ser sustituídos pola calidade de vida como eixos vinculantes da actividade arquitectónica. David Chipperfield, xa que logo, ten manifestado sempre unha preocupación social e ambiental. Así, nos seus numerosos proxectos de vivendas particulares, edificios para vivendas e complexos residenciais, amósase nitidamente o seu desexo de ofrecer unha oportunidade aos seus usuarios, de facer que as rutinas diarias sexan importantes e agradables, de facer que as cousas simples sexan especiais e de dar estrutura ás súas vidas e, ademais, teñan un engadido de liberdade para o seu espírito. Nas súas vivendas sociais, imponse, ademais, o seu sentido de racionalidade para aproveitar ao máximo os sempre escasos recursos disponibles. Na restauración ou renovación de edificios e obras mestras arquitectónicas, o seu señal de identidade é a capacidade de dar nova vida aos edificios, respetando a súa esencia e historia. Para elo, Chipperfield elixe habilmente as ferramentas que son instrumentais para o proxecto, en lugar daquelas que só poderían celebrar o arquitecto como artista. Nestes casos, o arquitecto ás veces casi desaparece. En todos eles mantense o concepto de continuidade casi sin fisuras entre o vello e o novo. A transición entre o tecido antigo e as novas incorporacións tanto interna como externamente, é discreta, mostrando diferencias sutís ao tempo que se garante que os edificios se adhiran ao principio de continuidade nas formas. En case todos eles, o testimonio das preexistencias mantense fronte ás incorporacións de novas linguaxes. Pola contra, o amplio espectro das súas habilidades aparece despregado na súa totalidade cando se lle pide que cree desde cero. Neste caso, David Chipperfield trata de expresar os seus sentimentos e emocións, poñendo a traballar conxuntamente a estrutura e os espacios arquitectónicos para formar unha nova paisaxe. A arquitectura debe realzar as calidades experienciales do material de construción, o espacio e a luz, dixo no seu discurso de recepción do Premio Pulitzer. Deste xeito, ao mesmo tempo que nos lembra que a arquitectura pertence ao lugar, subliña os trazos característicos que con máis forza distinguen a arquitectura. Cada deseño ten que ter unha solución específica nacida para o contexto do proxecto. En verbas de Arata Isozaki, autor do Museo Científico Domus da Coruña, un edificio sólido, en forma de habano, que co feitío do muro curvado resiste aos ventos do Orzán, como a vela dun navío hinchada polo vento, que chegou a se convertir o seu amigo inspirador. Por iso non vemos un edificio de David Chipperfield, recoñecible ao instante en diferentes cidades, senón diferentes edificios de David Chipperfield deseñados especificamente para cada circunstancia. Pero, desde o comenzo da súa carreira, os museos e galerías de arte teñen sido un foco de atención preferente a particular. Desde obras de pequena dimensión ata monumentos de gran escala en lugares urbanos prominentes e a miúdo complexos e dedicados. Os seus edificios de museos sempre teñen desafiado a noción de que un museo é un lugar para a cultura de élite e que, pola contra, teñen que ser conectores, lugares de reunión e observación, de modo que o edificio en si mesmo sexa un regalo á sociedade. Como enxeñeiro de materiais que son, permítame subliñar que nas súas galerías e museos os materiais aparecen expostos, limpos e resaltados a través do contraste. A madeira cálida equilibra a friaxe que podan ter a pedra e o formigón. Dan carácter ao espacio, pero ceden protagonismo á arte en exposición, xerando atmósferas adecuadas para a súa correcta apreciación. Os seus deseños facilitan un uso eficiente dos materiais de construción, exploran o uso de materiais duradeiros e sostibles, combinando consideracións ambientais con beneficios espaciais e funcionais. Melloran o equilibrio ecolóxico dos edificios e proporcionan un clima interior saudable. A regularidade, a continuidade e a repetición axudan a dar forma ao lenzo de fondo mentre a luz filtrada termina de construir o escenario adecuado. É unha mágoa que non dispoña do tempo suficiente para poder facer un resumo da súa obra e proxectos arquitectónicos máis sobranceiros, que abranguen 3 continentes, con estudios de arquitectura abertos en Londres, Berlín, Shanghai, Milán e Santiago de Compostela. Sen embargo, e tan só como botón de mostra, permítame agora salientar algunhas das súas obras principais terminadas e especialmente relacionadas coa creación e as artes e o legado histórico e patrimonial, como son a restauración do novo museo, Neus Museo, da Illa dos Museos de Berlín, un esforzo de 12 anos que adquiriu unha importancia nacional requerindo unha estreita colaboración e unha comprensión profunda da memoria e do seu significado. Ademais, a través deste proxecto, David Chipperfield e o seu equipo desenvolveron métodos de traballo que continuan a utilizar hoxe en día, tanto en termos dun enfoque para tratar o tecido histórico, co enfrontamento das expectativas nacionais e públicas, como na complexa participación das partes interesadas. Como el mesmo recoñece, o proxecto se convertiu nun lugar para aprender. A experiencia foi profunda debido á complicada logística política no contexto dun Berlín reunificado que pasou que puxo o seu equipo nunha situación de emocións intensas e, ao mesmo tempo, se sentiron intimidados polos desafíos da restauración e reconstrucción. O Museo de Literatura Moderna de Marbach, situado a carón do Museo Nacional Schiller, no Val do Río Neckar, en Alemania, a ampliación do Museo de Arte de San Luís, en Missouri, que alberga unha das coleccións de arte máis completas dos Estados Unidos, o edificio que alberga o Museo Jumes, en Ciudad de México, que exhibe unha parte importante da colección privada de arte contemporánea máis grande de Hispanoamérica, a renovación, o seu estado original, da nova Galería Nacional, deseñada por Mies van der Rohe en 1968 e considerada unha icona do modernismo clásico, e a conservación de edificios, sitios e barrios monumentais. A rehabilitación de 11 edificios históricos construídos entre os anos 1897 e 1932, que reflexan a diversidade da arquitectura colonial deste período, na que os estilos de construcción europeos se combinaron con elementos asiáticos que forman parte do proxecto Rock Boom en Shanghai, unha operación a gran escala protagonizado por un equipo de arquitectos internacionales durante 17 anos co fin de revitalizar o tecido urbano da parte norte do histórico Boom, o chamado Wall Street de Oriente, símbolo político e do poder económico actual de China. O Museo West Boom, unha nova galería de arte situada na corniche de Shanghai e asociada ao Centro Pompidou de París, como parte dunha colaboración cultural entre Francia e China. O novo edificio da Biblioteca Zicawei de Shanghai, que se encontra xunto a ben conservada Catedral de San Ignacio e cerca do edificio do Observatorio e da histórica Biblioteca Zicawei, quizáis os mellores exemplos de arquitectura construídos polos misioneiros xesuítas en Shanghai a principios do século XX. E para rematar, o complexo Morland Visité Capital, en París, transformación dun conxunto de edificios de oficinas pouco acolledores dos anos 60 do pasado siglo, situados ao longo do Boulevard Morland, á beira do río Sena, nun vívido barrio urbano mixto dentro do proxecto Reinventar París, liderado pola cidade de París. Foi Premio Internacional a Excelencia Riva no 2024 e no ano 2022 recibiu a Gran Medalla da Vila de París, o premio máis alto que a cidade de París pode otorgar ás persoas para honrarlas polo seu traballo na cidade. Permítame agora falar un momento sobre a vinculación de David Chipperfield con Galicia. David Chipperfield ten unha profunda vinculación con Galicia. Ten a súa residencia habitual nos meses de verán, dende hai xa moitos anos, en Corrubedo, desde onde participa nunha intensa vida social acompañado da súa familia e amigos e un estudio de arquitectura en Santiago de Compostela. Pero, ademais, ten un especial compromiso con Galicia de aportar coñecementos espaciais e ambientais para conservar e cuidar as paisaxes nunha terra que ten chegado a chamar o seu segundo fogar. No proxecto que impulsa e preside a Fundación RIA, o think tank e a Axencia Independente sin ánimo de lucro fundada por el no ano 2017 para promover o desenvolvemento sostible e a calidade de vida en Galicia e darse de conta que había retos que a arquitectura tenta asesorar sobre a conservación da súa paisaxe, a agricultura, ecoloxía e as tradicións territoriais para axudar a preservar e estender un ecosistema nas vindeiras décadas no contexto dos desafíos sociais e ambientais globais. Pois ben, ademais do seu traballo de diseño, David Chipperfield ten impartido docencia en numerosas conferencias en escolas de arquitectura de Europa e Estados Unidos. Como profesor de arquitectura na Academia Estatal de Belas Artes de Stuttgart, de 1995 a 2001, ocupou a cátedra Mies van der Rohe na Escola de Arquitectura de Barcelona e a cátedra Norman Foster de Diseño Arquitectónico na Escola de Arquitectura da Universidade de Yale. Ademais, é profesor visitante na Universidade das Artes de Londres. David Chipperfield ten publicados numerosos libros e artigos, entre eles convén salientar sobre a planificación, un experimento mental, no ano 2018, unha publicación que explora e teoriza as calidades urbanas dos desenvolvementos urbanos contemporáneos. Foi editor invitado no ano 2020 da revista italiana de diseño e tuvo numerosos premios e galardóns. Ademais de os premios e galardóns propios da arquitectura, convén lembrar aquí que David Chipperfield é membro da Real Academia das Artes do Reino Unido, membro de honra da Academia de Arte e Diseño de Florencia, do Instituto Americano de Arquitectos e da Asociación de Arquitectos Alemáns. Ten recibido en 1999 a medalla de ouro en Richtesenow da Fundación Alemana Alfred Stuffer de Hamburgo. En 2009 foi galardonado coa Orden de Mérito da República Federal de Alemania, o máis alto tributo que a República Federal de Alemania pode rendir ás persoas polos seus servicios á nación. En 2010, lle foi concedido o Premio Fundación Wall nas Artes. En 2011, a Medalla de Ouro Real do Riba, na categoría de Arquitectura para o Ocio e as Artes, e no 2013, o Premio Imperial da Asociación de Arte de Xapón. Todos eles otorgados en recoñecemento a toda unha vida de traballo. David Chipperfield foi nomeado comendador da Orden do Imperio Británico en 2004 polos seus servicios de arquitectura, membro da Orden dos Compañeiros de Honra do Reino Unido en 2021, membro electo da Orden de Mérito nas Ciencias e nas Artes da Alemanha en 2022 polos seus servicios de arquitectura a nivel internacional, comendador da Orden de Isabel da Católica en España en 2023 e recibiu tamén no ano 2023 a Gran Cruz do Mérito con estrela da Orden do Mérito da República Federal da Alemania. Foi embaixador do Ano Europeo do Patrimonio Cultural do ano 2018. No ano 2019 foi nomeado galego do ano polo xornal El Correo Gallego, en recoñecemento ao compromiso de David Chipperfield con Galicia e a labor da Fundación Riva. Remato. Antes de que o señor presidente da Academia che dea a benvida, en nome de todos os académicos, dicindo que estimula comprobar que aínda hoxe, logo de tantos anos de porfiada e frutífera dedicación, continúas a ser un profesional activo, creativo e fecundo, pouco dado a dar o barco ao vento polos logros pasados, porque estás sempre na busca de novas fronteiras intelectuais. Por eso, coa túa entrada na Academia, todos podemos beneficiarnos do teu pulo creador. Moitas gracias a todos pola súa atención.
Cumprindo coa tradición, prégolle a Sir David Chipperfield que, se ten a ben, proceda a dar lectura ao seu discurso de ingreso como académico correspondente da Real Academia Galega de Ciencias. Ten o seu dispor uns auriculares para a traducción simultánea. O discurso vai ser en inglés.
Thank you very much for those generous words. And thank you for this honor from the Academy. I feel a bit of an imposter to receive this recognition, nor am I a scientist or a Galician, and furthermore my Spanish is so poor that I must deliver this short acceptance speech in English. I want to, sorry, do I do this? Am I in control of this? Oh, yes. Okay. I want to focus my talk on the importance of our environment and how it influences our quality of life. I will try to explain how the challenges we have in developing and protecting our environment requires all, and especially my own profession, to react to the issues of climate change and social inequality. I will explain briefly why and how I have, alongside my other more conventional offices in London, Berlin, Milan, and Shanghai, initiated my own environmental studio, Fundación RIA, here in Santiago de Compostela. I will explain how we have developed a program based on dialogue, research, societal collaboration, and practical realization through real projects. I've titled my talk, Common Ground. In English, this phrase is used more metaphorically than physically, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. We use it about what we share, when in dispute, what common ground do we have? And of course, as an architect and a planner, there's a double meaning, because obviously our ground and our planet is a common ground, and we're having to realize the implications of that. As we all inevitably become more aware of the damage we have done to our natural environment, we must accept that the way we live now is threatening the way we will live in the future. The way we build our cities, our towns, our roads is not only damaging our environment, but is also promoting inequality, advantage and disadvantage, access and exclusion, and undermines the very idea of an equitable society. As an increasing proportion of the population find it more and more difficult to house themselves, and as the price of land and of rents escalates, we neglect to ensure that everyone, by right, should be provided with a secure and comfortable place as a human right and as a basis of our quality of life. This is a painting by Gustav Caillebotte. It's a slightly bourgeois version of what I want to talk about, but the idea is this man is in his house in comfort, and he's looking on to the recently completed Grand Boulevards of Paris, which in a way represent the collective. The way we plan our towns, cities, and villages is not only critical to our individual comfort and security, it also determines the quality of our social and civic life. This simple provision, individual comfort and security on the one hand, social and collective structure on the other hand, is one that has proved in history as the basis of a healthy society, and yet one that has proved over the last 50 years or so to be increasingly difficult to deliver. This difficulty cannot be about resource or ability, but one of political will and commitment. In my own city of London, there could be no more explicit illustration of the phenomena of the commodification of architecture and the city. The city has developed not as a response to human needs, but as part of a global investment market. This construction is not about making a better city. The buildings do not conform to any idea other than the exploitation of land value. In this process, the two fundaments of the way we have made cities has been abandoned. That is, the opportunity to represent collective values and to protect and enjoy the social and cultural complexity that comes with urban density. even in an image like this, you clearly see that at an even more modest scale, building houses is not driven by any consideration of community or environment, but by commercial forces and convenience. It demonstrates in the most explicit way that we have no mechanisms, or not sufficient mechanisms, in place to safeguard those concerns, to represent our ideas of how we should live. Urban planning has been replaced by market forces. Instead of determining where development should happen, considering social and civic priorities, planning is reduced to trying to coordinate and make sense of market-driven energies. Planning no longer directs, but follows along afterwards like a lost dog. The impending crisis of climate change and the growing crisis of social inequality means that we can no longer regard these issues as unfortunate and as an expression of our time, but one that must be addressed if we are to truly confront these existential challenges. In 2012, I was invited to be the director of the Venice Biennale of Architecture. The Architecture Biennale alternates with the Art Biennale and is one of the most important events for the architectural community. Over the last 30 years, it has tended to become a showroom of individual talent, giving architects the opportunity to show their own work and their design skills. At the time of my Biennale, I felt that as a profession, we had to examine not only we had to examine our collective contribution as well as our individual skills and our individual careers. We have, like everyone, been swept along in the energy of the consumerist society and found our task more determined by the priorities of the market rather than the concerns of society. Given the growing understanding that the wider construction and real estate sector contributes significantly to both environmental degradation and climate change, and has done little to address the issues of affordable housing and a secure environment that would reduce the growing issues of social inequality, we need to bring these concerns to the foreground. The Biennale was an interesting challenge to my profession, who are naturally inclined to want to show their individual skills, but I insisted that every contribution had to demonstrate in what way did the project engage either within the profession with colleagues or societally. This is one of the installations. I coordinated 128 architects, 128 egos, and this was the project of Herzog Demeron, where they interestingly showed all of the newspaper articles that were written against the project they were doing in Hamburg, as a way of opening up a discussion about the issues of building a major public project in a sensitive environment. In the Biennale Common Ground, I challenged my colleagues to submit works that demonstrate collaborative initiatives between architects, showing how we can work together rather than promote and continue a competitive and rivalrous profession. I also invited them to show projects that were more directed towards the interests of community than those of commerce. The cry was to the common good, and that the idea of the common ground was not only a metaphor of what we share, but to remind us that it's also a physical reality. The task of directing the Biennale came shortly after completing the project, which influenced my attitude to design and the role of collaboration, not only between professional colleagues and clients, but with the wider community. The reconstruction of the ruin of Neues Museum on Berlin's Museum Island engaged me and my office into a project that required not only conventional skills and responsibilities, but also an engagement with the expectations, emotions, and anxieties of the citizens of Berlin and Germany. The reunification of Germany was a huge project with enormous political, emotional, financial, and physical implications. These issues were felt with particular focus in Berlin, a city totally contorted by the war and by the subsequent partitioning of Germany. Split in half and then stranded deep into East German territory, West Berlin developed in the most artificial manner over the 50 years following the war. Both parts of the divided city became a heightened subject, projecting their ideologies onto this exhausted place. With the collapse of the wall, this poor city had to deal once again with its complex history. These are images of the completed project. Within this context, the Neues Museum, which had remained a ruin throughout the GDR period, became a complex symbol and record of this history. Our project wasn't a simple one of rebuilding. I had committed to an idea of rebuilding and repairing the monumental ruin in a way that protected the complex layers of history while making it once again into a functioning museum. It was an approach that irritated many Berliners who were rather fed up with their history. There is a saying that all cities have history, but Berlin has too much. This polemic approach, intellectually correct but emotionally difficult, made the project the subject of much attention and debate about how Berlin should deal with its complex past in the process of rebuilding itself. I have no intention of explaining the project here, only to say that the experience forced us to see the complexity and challenges of the project not as a regrettable limitation, but as the very purpose of the task. It taught us that dialogue and open reflection is the basis of a critical process. Our project could not be realized unless it engaged seriously with the contradictory concerns of the community, not only Berlin, but of Germany. Making this project depended on us framing and reframing the question at the same time as developing possible solutions and answers. The solution was to be found in the doing. The doing needs to be properly considered and articulated, strengthened by exposure rather than protected by being hidden. In other words, I think this was a project that so engaged the emotions, the expectations, and the anxieties of a recently reunited Germany and Berlin that it could not be resolved by a person. My role had to be a representative one of collecting together and guiding and shaping these concerns, which meant that this was not an exercise of only drawing and imagination. It was an exercise of engagement, and engagement with a very robust community. The Berliners can be quite rude, I would say, and very explicit in their concerns. So this was really a lesson for us about this constructive idea of not seeing difficulties as obstacles, but in a way requiring engagement. We developed over the many years of planning a process of engagement, dialogue, and participation that allowed us in the most transparent way to determine the design not as an a priori solution, but one that grew out of engaged process. The skepticism of the Berliners was a continuous presence in our concerns, not to be ignored, but to be considered and engaged. The project was continuously at the center of discussion, and I learned how to take this discussion to the community. I believed it was my responsibility to the city and its people. In fact, as a foreigner, I had no right to behave otherwise. You can't see this very well, but this is the skeptical Berliners queuing up for 6 hours when we opened the building, first of all, and the press and the television was there waiting for the ensuing clamor of opposition, but it didn't come. Luckily, they were all very happy. The staff, the guards were even prepared and trained how to deal with people who might come in and express their anger at how the project was done. Luckily, the effect was rather different. What does this have to do with Galicia and the work of our foundation? My family and I had spent every summer for the last 34 years on holiday in a small fishing town of Correspondente. Gradually, the 2-week summer holiday became an annual 2-month summer retreat for colleagues, staff, clients, and friends. Our commitment to the region became substantial, but it was still one of grateful visitors. The commitment was not accidental. We found in Galicia not only a beautiful nature and wonderful food, but a culture that was direct and seemingly less worried than most about the aspirations of our contemporary society. As an architect, I had always obviously been irritated by bad architecture and development of the typical towns and villages. Probably the coastal villages have suffered most, and Ribeira can probably claim the title of capital of feísmo. Being on holiday, I accepted it and felt that at least it was honest ugliness. Finally, 8 years ago, I decided to accept the challenge to consider the factors that have been eroding the quality of these towns and villages over the last 50 years. Of course, these problems are not uniquely Galician or Spanish. As I've already explained, we can identify the same issues and tendencies everywhere. The situation is quite different from London to Galicia, but the factors are the same. We struggle everywhere to find a balance between development and protection. We struggle to include the complex and contradictory concerns into the way we develop our environment. We have always complained about the way things change around us, even while there might be good reasons why decisions are made. We have needed to build. We need to develop industries and develop better systems of communication and connection. This is not in question. But as the scale of these operations gets bigger, so does their consequence. As the dimension of these operations gets greater, decisions depend increasingly on political will and commercial realities. As this process becomes more complex, the place of result becomes more and more detached from the place of decision. And those that decide become further from those affected. This is not a conspiracy. It's not a question of blame or politics. It is a contemporary challenge that we shouldn't ignore. We can dismiss these issues as mistakes or acts of ignorance. We can justify them as the price of progress. We can accept things as somehow inevitable. We can also get confused about cause and effect. Is this place ugly because of the buildings, and therefore it's just a problem of design? Or are the design of the buildings a consequence of a larger problem, and their expression, not the cause? Perhaps we are just nostalgic. We all remember when our towns were more beautiful, and we regret what has happened to them. Of course, we can look back at how things were and imagine a more harmonious time, forgetting the significant social and human advances we have made in the meantime. It is difficult to select which bits of progress we want and which bits we don't want. If we allow ourselves to romanticize the past, we can see in an image like this an idea of a relationship between human activity, built environment, and nature, a relationship that has been lost in our contemporary arrangement. While we might have only lamented this loss before, we must now consider this more seriously, not just as a picturesque memory, but as a symbol of our contemporary condition, one that is determined by our increasingly dysfunctional relationship with the nature we depend on. This triangle has been eroded, and our physical and natural environment is undeniable proof. We can't put things back or unwind the mistakes, but we can try to be more aware of the consequences of our actions, and we can try to repair the damage. But this is only possible if we accept that it is a problem. We have become surprisingly accommodating to such situations. They have become a new normality, pushed away by citizens as something that seems uncomfortable but inevitable, and politicians as something too complex and sensitive to deal with. As we become more conscious of the effects of the damage we have created globally, we begin to realize that such situations cannot be seen only as a shame and visually disturbing, but otherwise without significant harm. We must see such things not only for what they are, but what they stand for. They represent our failings to anticipate the harmful consequence of apparently harmless decisions, not just in the place, but as a cumulative erosion of our environment. Even actions made with the best intentions, within the limits and pressures of an operative process, keeping traffic working, responding to needs and priorities. No one is purposely damaging our streets, our towns, our villages, or natural environment. This is not a conspiracy. This talk is not a political criticism. It's a condition that we have everywhere because of our struggle to engage proactive planning process. Everywhere. I've worked everywhere in the world. It's the same problem. No one is purposely damaging our streets, our towns, villages, or natural environment. But as a society, we have to set priorities and targets. We have set priorities and targets without sufficient understanding of their results and without sufficient reaction to their consequences. The environmental crisis that now confronts us requires us to reconsider the way we live and the way we make decisions. We must anticipate the consequences of how we develop our environment. We must develop decision-making processes that are currently inevitably and understandably dominated by short-term results, and to find one more determined by long-term effects. As architects and planners, we must take care about why we build, what we build, where we build. The answers are not so simple and not easy to confront within the constraints of conventional commercial practice. 8 years ago, I decided to set up an independent studio dedicated to these issues. If in normal practice we are constrained by the limits of each project, unable to question, but only to give creative answers, I was interested to question these limits. Free of limits and free of clients, we can ask the questions. Why is the center of the town so full of traffic? Why are there so many empty buildings, and yet we continue to build on green land? Why are the villages and the rural being abandoned? Of course, these questions beckon answers which we try to address, and these answers require us to go far from our professional subject or knowledge. Once we accept the decision to require us to connect issues together, we return to the task of engagement, consultation, collaboration, and communication. We have addressed our concerns about the environment and its challenges through real projects, and more recently through the public program of Casaria, where we try to use our building as a place of exhibition, dialogue, and research. The ambitions and criteria of the Foundation are quite direct. They are founded on a number of overriding beliefs that are not scientific but seem to have substance. Firstly, that the physical, environmental, social, and commercial conditions that exist in Galicia give it great opportunity to achieve sustainability targets more easily than might be possible in other regions or parts of the world. This premise is based on the fact that the region is not dominated by major metropolitan centers, that it contains a high proportion of forested land, a productive food system that is still essentially small scale, and a community that is very committed to these natural qualities and with a great understanding of the ways of nature, both on land and sea. With this knowledge comes an understanding and culture that has not been extinguished, even under the forces of modern society. I will attempt to summarize what we believe will secure a sustainable future for the region, both in terms of natural and built environment, from a social and commercial one. To protect and develop the natural environment, considering it as the region's greatest asset, i.e. the natural environment as its greatest asset, is natural capital. So protect Galicia's greatest asset, its natural capital. Consider the region as a territorial unit balancing commercial development within the overall environmental and social framework. Strengthen the planning and governance systems to support a territorial approach that engages local conditions, knowledge, and experience within well-planned and coordinated policy frameworks. Encourage innovation, development, and inward investment of the traditional food and forestry sectors, especially considering the development of secondary and tertiary industries. Prioritize practical and vocational training and development in these sectors in order to increase employment opportunities within the dispersed communities. Create employment opportunities by investing in developing secondary industries as an extension of the primary productive industries of food and forestry. Develop the communications and transport systems consistent to the challenges of a dispersed community. Requalify and repair urban damage in cities and towns and villages by prioritizing conventional urban, social, and civic values and needs. The only way such targets can be achieved is by common effort and through common responsibility. It cannot be the sole responsibility of the government, nor should we be relying on the extraordinary examples of various individual initiatives. The challenge must be embraced as a common one. It needs to be concentrated into a collective mission. We should not be reliant upon or hindered by conventional politics. Issues of environment are beyond politics. After 40 years working all over the world as an architect, I've become familiar with the difficulty of trying to resolve idealistic targets with practical realities. We all live our lives in this ambiguous territory, but in a professional condition, it is quite defining. In planning, is it possible to even imagine targets if they don't seem practical given the conditions? On the other hand, doing only what is possible, realizable, feasible, politically or financially, means that our environment can only be the consequence of practical actions. How can we articulate criteria, give them status, without them looking naive and unrealistic? Our environment is, of course, the consequence of the realistic. The projects of the Foundation try to operate by accepting these two conditions. We believe that it is critical to realize results, and by definition, this limits the dimension and scale of the project. However, we consider each realizable project to be located within a larger vision. For example, the work we have done on the A305, the A305 is the road many of you know, running from all the way from Aguinho, I think, to Boiro, and then to Boiro. The work that we've done on the 305 could be dismissed as only a local improvement of sidewalks and traffic, which it is, but its mission is part of a larger idea of protecting the urban character of the town, which has been somewhat destroyed by the effects of a main traffic road cutting it in half. We can see the typical village used to have a street as its heart, but gradually over these 50 years, the street transforms to a convenient road. This isn't anyone's decision. This is a growing phenomenon. I'm not blaming anybody for this. This is what happens. But of course, the result is that the village has no heart. It's a village now with two halves. The church is on the left-hand side, the school is on the right. The sports is up the hill, the port is on that side. So this innocent mistake, in a way, defines a physical condition. You could say this is aesthetically unpleasing. We see this everywhere. Does it really damage everything? In a way, yes, because if we believe that the villages and towns are the basis of our quality of life, that the civic and social space is that basis, if we erode that, if we surrender it to traffic, then we've surrendered the identity and the quality of those towns, and in some ways, why we want to live here, why we want to live where we want to live. We cannot just dismiss this as an unfortunate phenomenon of contemporary society, which it is. There's no doubt. The initiative is part of a bigger idea of reducing the negative effects of traffic, improving shared transportation, and repairing the fabric of the towns by giving priority to pedestrians over cars. In order to develop the idea along the many towns of the 305, we also need to think about how such projects can be commissioned and realized. More importantly, about how public infrastructure works. And more importantly, how public infrastructure works can be addressed not only by the issues of practicality and engineering, but also become more socially inclusive projects considering the civic, aesthetic, and communal qualities of the town. With the support of the Marta Ortega Foundation and the Mayor of Puebla, we have developed the urban and traffic guidelines and launched a competition in order to ensure that the task of the A305 as it goes through this town, Puebla, Camanal, will be a competition in order to ensure that the task is given the importance it deserves. This is one of the many competitions that we are organizing. We believe that defining the task and commissioning and controlling the process is fundamental to developing more embedded projects of intervention and protection. We start as architects looking at the derelict buildings or brutal roads crossings, badly planned urban centers. As soon as you look a bit further, just a few meters away, you are already in the rural, a productive landscape so defined by the local resources and ways of production. The changes over the last 50 years have radically transformed the way in which we manage this land, our resources and ecosystems. The progresses of industrialization and the anxiety of being modern have transformed only over 50 years the balances of our ecosystems. A sectionalization of the topics, agriculture, forestry, urban, without considering the interdependencies and ecological balances. We have looked at our territory as a map, separating layers and without considering the role of local communities and the territorial organization of villages in this system. We are now suffering the effects of these unbalances, unstoppable wildfires that are fed by the effects of rural abandonment, monofunctional plantations, and depopulation. The Barbanza Eco-Social Lab, in collaboration between us at Fundación RIA, University of Santiago, has been working with the local forest community of the region for more than 5 years, supporting their initiatives with technical advice and governance assistance, funding contributions and communication of actions. Applied sciences, planning institutions, and community action have been combined under the common ground for the common good. The mission to achieve a more resilient territory in a region where recurring wildfires are putting in risk not only the biodiversity, but people's lives and the economic income of thousands of families that live off of the sea resources of the Ríos Rosa and Moros. Sorry. There can be few places that better illustrate the reality of common ground than the mountain communities. Common land represents approximately 30% of the Galician territory. While being in some ways anachronistic in our modern world, these communities, rather than being only a representation of another time and another way of life, can be seen as a way of caring about our landscape and the community. Last week, this project was recognized by the Ministry of Ecological Transition as one of the 39 flagship projects of their more than 1,000 granted initiatives. It's not necessary to say how honored of receiving this award we as coordinators were, but mostly the task we must give credit to is we must give credit to the local communities that bravely have taken responsibility of accepting this challenge, accepting the big task, which is managing an important European-funded grant. 1 year ago, we moved into our new home in Santiago in Verge de Cerca. This not only allows us to expand the research activities and develop our live projects, it also allows us to open the discussion in a more public forum. Alongside the studios, the research studios and design studios, we have an exhibition space, a conference room, and meeting rooms for events. On the ground floor, we have a canteen which serves our staff, but also visitors to the building. On the top two floors of the building, provides accommodation for visiting groups of students, researchers, and lecturers. The subjects of the exhibitions vary and are supported by an active series of talks and conferences on the chosen topics. This year, the major exhibition was dedicated to the subject of the Galician food market. We were concerned that the importance of the food markets was being underestimated, and the markets themselves were suffering from changes in contemporary shopping habits. I think we all value these places not only as civic moments in the town and village, but as social centers. Most importantly, in the Galician context, they are celebrations of seasonal and local food production, which lies at the very heart of the community. We have seen in so many other places these markets gradually turned into touristic, gastronomic entertainment, but we believe this should be resisted. The exhibition was an opportunity to bring producers and representatives of the food sector together to discuss the future of small-scale, high-quality food production. This is just a range of events that we hosted with different people from different parts of the sector coming to talk. I would have to say we started off slightly pessimistic about the future of the food market, but in our research we analyzed the status of the 107 food markets in Galicia, and I would say that we left with a rather much more optimistic idea of the importance and the future of the food market. If the Common Ground Biennale was about overcoming the individualism in architecture, now the present and future environmental challenges demand overcoming the sectorization of disciplines, establishing common ground between disciplines, sectors, and institutions. In considering the task of revitalizing the rural, we have witnessed how alone and disconnected are the local initiatives, how much need they have for administrative, legal, technical, scientific support. In our mission to encourage the promoting of these initiatives, we want to give visibility and encourage the creation and consolidation of what we call facilitating entities that offer this support to local initiatives, as Fundación RIA does in its own small and modest way. I would like to give voice to a call for the scientific community to engage with these challenges and to offer their knowledge to be applied in pilot projects and as part of a local ecosystem that will flourish as a resilient, sustainable, and prosperous future. The nature of Galicia not only defines its character, but has over so many years shaped the people. A population that has worked with the land and sea over generations has a special relationship with its country. This relationship is challenged by modern habits and global trends, but we believe this community, more than any other, can give example to others about the importance of protecting our environment and realizing that it is the basis of our quality of life and the security of future generations, our common ground. Thank you.
Prego a David Chipperfield se achega ao estrado. Sir David Chipperfield, acepta vostede o nomeamento como académico correspondente da Real Academia Galega de Ciencias?
Sí.
Yes. Asume vostede como propio os obxectivos da mesma?
Sí, gracias.
Gracias. Xa que vostede aceptou o seu nomeamento, asumí como propios os obxectivos desta Real Academia e deu lectura ao preceptivo discurso de ingreso, en nome de todas as académicas e académicos, procedémoslle a entregarlle o diploma e a impoñerlle a medalla que o acrediten como académico correspondente desta institución. Ok. Oh, yes. Okay. Please. Okay. Señor Conselleiro de Emprego, Comercio e Migración, señora Vicerrectora de Política Científica da Universidade de Santiago de Compostela, señor Vicerreitor de Investigación e Transferencia da Universidade de A Coruña, señora Directora da Axencia Galega de Innovación, señoras e señores académicos, señora Directora Xeral de Urbanismo da Xunta de Galicia, señor Reitor da Universidade de Santiago de Compostela, señor Concelleiro de Economía e Facenda do Concello de Santiago, señor Director da AXUC, señor Decano do Colexio Oficial de Arquitectos de Galicia, señor Director patrono e membros da Fundación RIA, señor director da David Chipperfield Architect Santiago, señor exalcalde do Concello de Santiago de Compostela, señor director do Centro Galego de Arte Contemporáneo, señores presidentes da COAG de Santiago Pontevedra, señor vicepresidente do Museo Pobo Galego, membros dos colexios oficiais, decanos, directores, compañeros, familiares, amigos, querida Evelyn, moitas grazas por acompañarnos hoxe nesta ocasión tan especial. Vou a dirixirme a Sir David Chipperfield en inglés por tratar de llevar unha mensaxe un poquinho máis persoal, polo tanto, podemos seguir conectados cos auriculares todos os que o prefiran. It is a true privilege and a sincere pleasure to welcome today into our Academy a figure of global renown and deep local commitment, Sir David Chipperfield. With this act, the Royal Galician Academy of Sciences embraced not only one of the most influential architects of our time, but also a thinker, a planner, and a citizen deeply engaged with the challenges of our shared world. His work is admired across continents for its integrity, its clarity, and its respectful dialogue with place and history. And yet, what brings us most pride today is that Sir David Chipperfield is not only a voice in the world of architecture, is also a voice for Galicia. His architectural legacy spans continents and cultures. Among his most emblematic works, we may recall the Nauwitz Museum in Berlin in 2009, a masterful restoration that reconciled historical memory with contemporary expression, the Hepworth Wakefield Gallery in the United Kingdom, 2011, a luminous and powerful museum that redefined the relationship between art and its landscape, the Museo Jumes in Mexico City in 2013, a sober yet monumental home for contemporary art, the St. James Simon Gallery in Berlin, 2018, conceived as the new civic gateway to the Museum Island, and the Procuratie Vecchie in Venice, 2022, where sensitive restoration brought new social and cultural life to one of the city's more symbolic spaces. And multiple civic, cultural, and academic buildings across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. These works are much more than aesthetically refined structures. They are thoughtful intervention in the urban fabric, designed to improve public life and respect the character of their surroundings. In recognition of this lifelong contribution to architecture with purpose and humanity, he was awarded with the Pritzker Architecture Prize in 2023, the highest distinction in the field, often described as the Nobel Prize of Architecture. The jury emphasizes that his architecture is radical in its restraint, modest yet elegant, sober just powerful, consistently showing respect for history, culture, and the natural environment. They value his ability to create buildings that are not defined by a personal style, but by the capacity to adapt to the context, responding uniquely to each place and community. The Pritzker jury also highlighted his understanding of sustainability as a relevance and durability, eliminating the superfluous, designing only what is essential, and ensuring that his works remain meaningful both physically and culturally over time. Above all, they praised his conviction that architecture must serve society, not vanity, offering spaces that elevate public life, nurture inclusion, and strengthen our shared humanity. Yet, beyond the awards and the celebrated projects, what distinguished Sir David Chipperfield is the conceptual clarity and ethical conviction that underpin his work. He has always rejected the idea of architecture as a spectacle, choosing instead to define it as a discipline of service to the society. His buildings are not conceived as isolated icons, but as a thoughtful contribution to the civic fabric, spaces that foster encounter, cultural exchange, and a sense of belonging. So David has often stated that architecture can change people's life, not only through the creation of iconic buildings, but through the design of spaces for enjoyment, encounter, and community life. He believes that architecture must contribute to the quality of everyday life, offering places where people feel a sense of belonging, dignity, and connection. His career illustrates that architecture is not only about designing structures, but about shaping the condition of life. Its project, whether cultural, civic, or urban, seeks to restore continuity between past and future, between human activity and the natural environment, between individual experience and collective memory. His approach demonstrates that architecture can and must be a force for inclusion, dignity, and sustainability. Sir David has also become a leading voice for the future of architecture, advocating for a practice rooted in sustainability, not only in materials and technologies, but also in urban planning, territorial balance, and respect for the environment. He reminds us the responsibility of architecture extends beyond the building site, touching the way communities grow, how the landscapes are preserved, and how societies choose to inhabit their spaces. What makes today's occasion especially meaningful is his strong and lasting relationship with Galicia. His connection to our land is neither occasional nor symbolic. It is real, rooted, and transformative. Since first arriving in the small coastal village of Corrupelo 34 years ago, Sir David has developed a lasting relationship with Galicia, one that goes beyond affection and enters the realm of action. This commitment took shape in 2017 with the creation of the Foundation RIA, a platform based in Galicia that brings together architecture, ecology, engineering, and territorial planning to address one of the most urgent questions of our time. How can we inhabit the land with intelligence and respect? From its headquarters in Barbanza and through a studio in Santiago de Compostela, the Foundation has developed integrated visions for coastal sustainability, rural revitalization, and infrastructural planning, always placing the Galician territory and its communities at the center. In doing so, it has become a bridge between global knowledge and local wisdom, between contemporary design and traditional landscape, between the future and Galicia. Sir David has offered Galicia not only his talent, but also his conscience and his care. Sir David Chipperfield's works remind us that science and art, when joined by ethics and purpose, can become tools for regeneration. And in time, when the balance between progress and preservation feels even more delicate, his voice is one we are proud to amplify. The Academy wishes to highlight this dual dimension of Sir David Chipperfield's trajectory: a global architect shaping the future of cities and culture, and a committed citizen working hand in hand with Galicia for a more sustainable tomorrow. His admission enriches our institution, strengthening our mission to unite science, culture, and society for the benefit of our people. By joining this academia, he not only honors us with his name, but he also strengthens our mission. He helps us reaffirm that science must be rooted in place, that knowledge must be shared across disciplines, and that the future must be built not only with intelligence, but also with care. Sir David, on behalf of the Royal Galician Academy of Science, it is with admiration and gratitude that we welcome you into our community. Your presence here honors us, and your example inspires us. May your presence here continue to inspire a deeper connection between thought and territory, between Galicia and the world. Welcome to your academia, welcome to your scientific home in Galicia. Thank you very much. Isto foi todo. Nin máis nin menos. É unha honra realmente ter connosco a unha persoa tan comprometida coa sociedade, tan comprometida con Galicia, un líder mundial, agora traballando tamén por Galicia a noso carón. Sin máis, darlles moitísimas grazas pola súa presencia e imos compartir uns petiscos para relaxarnos un poquinho máis. Moitas grazas.